You're listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandhi. On this episode, we're discussing Devil's Creek, track 3 from 2012's Failed States, which was released on September 3rd, 2012 on Epitaph Records, 9 years ago, if you can make sense of that, Greg.
God help us. Yeah. And I'm really excited about this episode, Keith. This is a very important song to me. So, what else did you find out about it?
So the Jason Livermore remaster, which we discussed on Jason's appearance on a bonus episode a while back, was released later on February 1st of 2019 on vinyl and streaming services.
Yeah, I was wondering about this remaster that Jason, he talks about how it's sort of like a partial remix in the episode. So go back and listen to that if you missed it, because Jason's technical overview of what he actually did to Failed States was really fascinating to me. But recently, I was, I don't have like my phone hooked up to Bluetooth or anything like that in my car. My car is a little too old for that. So I actually rebought the Failed States CD recently because it's easier for my car. And when it was delivered, it arrived as the original mastering version that came out in 2012. So I'm guessing not a lot of investment was made by Epitaph to press CDs of the remaster.
Mm-hmm.
So interestingly, I listen to this record all the time in the car because it comes up every few days in my 6-disc CD changer. But hilariously, the version that I listen to the most is the original 2012 master, because that's just what I have in the car and that's what comes up. In order to listen to the remaster, which I do on my runs or on vinyl here in my living room, but that's what comes up. So it was kind of interesting to me to notice that when it was delivered to my house in the year 2021, it arrived on CD as the original version,
Right. And even with the band stating clearly, and many fans, that the remastered version is their preferred version of Failed States, the original is also what I've heard the most and what I'm also more likely to listen to now. I don't have the remaster on vinyl. And if I'm listening to music, it's probably through just on my iPod, which I still use. And, I'm most likely to listen to this in the car rather than, just listening on my iPod. So I actually don't fire up the remastered version digitally too often, except to compare for, the versions that I know when doing research for an episode. And I need to make that switch, knowing how important it is to the band for the album to be heard how they wanted it to be heard. I do need to switch over because there are distinct differences that you can hear from 2012 to 2019.
Yeah, and we've done a lot of the compare contrast side-by-side episode in some of our earlier Failed States episodes, which if people have missed, we kind of dissected some of our personal observations as non-musicians ourselves for what it looks like as a non-musician, non-technical recording and mastering expert ourselves, like some of the little nuances that we found by firing up both versions side by side, back and forth. I did that. I spent a lot of time on that last summer whenever we were like basically locked down during the pandemic. And I would just put one LP on back and forth, back and forth, back and forth on my turntable and just blast it to see what I could notice. So we talked about that before, but something else caught my eye. I was looking at the Sheet Happens book and the booklet for the LP. And if I think of the inside of the design layout for Failed States, the LP, there's those band photographs inside the record that are like, they're in the wilderness, essentially. You know what I mean? They're like standing in what looks to be sort of like a swampy, marshy area, like on the edge of the woods. And obviously I have no idea where these photos were taken. I'm sure some people in Winnipeg could have taken me right there had I thought to ask when I was up there last week, but they were taken by I apologize if I get this name totally wrong, Mandy Malezdrowicz. And ever since this record came out, I have always personally connected the band photographs on the inside of the record to the song Devil's Creek because of the setting.
Yeah.
The setting of the photographs and the setting of the song and the insect ambient noise couldn't you just imagine them like busting out as like a field recorder while they were having those band photographs taken, and then just download that insect buzzing and then just plopped that right onto the end of the song? Like, I could totally see something like that happen. I'm sure that's not what happened, but I connect Devil's Creek to the photographs for the band on the inside of the LP.
Yeah, the burrs stuck to their clothing very much fits with the rest of the imagery that Chris crafts, as a child exploring this place, for sure.
Absolutely. And you know how sometimes we always like find like old reviews and stuff like that, and old like materials that have been released in the media around the time of releases. So I was looking through some old materials released at around the time of Failed States, and CBC Music in Canada did a thing with the band where they commented on each track of Failed States.
Oh, right.
And I can't find the original now. I guess CBC's website like auto filters like over a number of years, but songmeanings.com preserved Todd's comment about this song. And here's what Todd said in that interview. He said, "This is Chris's song again, and I'm assuming about little periods of depression where you feel like you're zoned out. Our whole band has them. It's part of thinking about things and living and worrying about yourself, worrying about being perfect, worrying about the future of the world. Sometimes it feels like the only escape is to maybe go sit somewhere by yourself, hopefully in nature, and just come back to earth. So this past spring, I had the same thing. I just didn't want to go. I just didn't want to get out of the city. I needed to, And I think Devil's Creek is by maybe Stonewall. I think it's a little creek by Portage la Prairie. It's right behind where Chris lived. And I guess when he was a kid, he probably went down there and did whatever to feel isolated from adults and the other kids. I think that's probably why we became punks. It was a thing to do when you didn't feel like you belonged." And the Stonewall comment caught my eye because he said, "I think Devil's Creek is by maybe Stonewall." So I Googled Stonewall, Manitoba, which is nowhere near Portage la Prairie, nowhere near Devil's Creek. So I think Todd got that comment wrong during the interview, which is totally fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was also digging around. Did you do any like digging around for like actual locations called Devil's Creek?
Well, considering that Chris just shared it, and I took the song meeting to be more of all of our personal Devil's Creeks, like I didn't think too much about the specific location that Chris is referring to.
So I did some digging. And
also anticipating that you would.
Yeah. I like I was telling you off air when we recorded our state lottery episode, there were a few things that like I overlooked that I was like, all right, Greg, you got to get your head back in the game for this Devil's Creek episode. Right. No more oversights. So I did some digging for Devil's Creek locations. And if you go on Google Maps or whatever, and you search Devil's Creek, Manitoba, a geographic marker will pop up for a place called Devil's Creek that pops up on the far south shore of Lake Winnipeg. So that's one. There is another Devil's Creek that our pal Jamie Fougere hipped me to, which is a small creek that crosses Highway 59 about 3 kilometers south of Lebo, Manitoba. And I apologize if I pronounce Lebo incorrectly. I've never been there, but you can find that on like Street View. If you go to Highway 59, 3 kilometers south of Lebo, Manitoba, you can find a Devil's Creek street sign marker, which is pretty cool. I found a couple of them yesterday. But as you and I know, the location of the real Devil's Creek has been revealed on Chris's Patreon. And man, I got to just nerd out for a second here with you, Keith, because as you know, I just went to Winnipeg, and it was the best weekend probably of my entire life. And night 3 of the Propagandhi 3-night shows in Winnipeg, Chris all of a sudden starts talking, and he was like, anybody ever heard that Propagandhi podcast? Well, guess who's here? Greg's here. And like I was like screaming with glee, but I was like totally frozen.
Awesome. Mortified in a way.
Mortified, sure. Like in place, like in my mask, like with my hat pulled down really low in the crowd.
You're somehow shrinking as you tower over everyone. You just melt.
And I was standing right in front of the sound booth. So I was standing like 2 feet away from Barney, Propagandhi's sound guy. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then he's like, yeah, he's been going around seeing the sites and posting them on the social media. And I was going to give him the coordinates for a place called Devil's Creek. And then he talked about how it was just a ditch. So then he like friggin' shouted out the podcast from the stage. And I was like, oh my God.
How awesome.
Oh man, it was totally an amazing moment because Devil's Creek is such an important song to me. So to have the podcast get shouted out on this song was like one of the, like, it couldn't have been more perfect for me. And it felt amazing. But he did think about that and reflect on that comment from the stage. And then all of a sudden there's a video popping up in our Patreon where he pointed out the exact spot for his Devil's Creek, which does not carry that as a specifically designated title. It was just something that it was a special spot to him that he named that.
Right.
So there's no road sign marker or label for it being Devil's Creek at all. But our friend of the podcast, who I shared an Airbnb with in Winnipeg, Scott Robertson, who goes by the Instagram name Propagandhi PhD because of his dissertation writing he's doing focusing on the band.
Oh, how cool.
I know. So so everybody go follow Propagandhi PhD on Instagram because Scott's doing awesome stuff. He's like doing like an academic work about this band in the College of Education at UCLA, which is really cool.
Oh man, how awesome.
So he's doing something like kind of like what we're doing, but he's doing it from an academic lens.
Yeah.
So he's going to be tying in like tons and tons of scholars and works. He's going to be taking it into an academic track, which is really sweet.
And I saw on social media, he hit a bunch of the same spots you did, but also a few other places that you didn't get to. So yeah, definitely. If you're not from Winnipeg, give him a follow so you can check out some of those other Propagandhi specific locations.
Exactly. Because my trip was so short. I was only there for 3 nights, but Scott was up there for a couple of weeks. And so he rented a car, drove to Portage la Prairie and Southport, where Chris and Jord grew up. To scout out all the old locations related to the early years of the band. So Scott got to go and stand at Devil's Creek as referenced in the song. He was just there the other day, and the location of Devil's Creek in Southport, Manitoba is at Mile Road 62 North on the west side of Southport, Manitoba. And if you go onto maps on the internet, Patreon supporter Chris's Patreon supporter Kevin Fisher added a historical marker at that exact spot that Chris designated. So now if you go to Google Maps and you go to Southport, Manitoba, and you find the spot at Mile Road 62 and zoom in on it, Devil's Creek now has an actual marker on Google Maps, which Google did approve. And so everybody should go there and write a review for the spot. It already has like 5 or 6 reviews too, I think, like Patreon supporters of Chris's.
So
like
cool.
They're reviewing it. So I would 100% encourage everyone to go write a review because why not? And I actually have the actual geographic coordinates. So here are the coordinates for Devil's Creek. 49.916031 and minus 98.285131. So you can street view it and everything, folks. So go check out Devil's Creek.
Greg, what a song to have scheduled really on the books to talk about this week after your just historic, momentous, personally important and exciting trip to Winnipeg to see Propagandhi, to meet so many people that you've been in discourse with via, actual podcast or email or direct message. I mean, this really seems like the perfect song to discuss, and whether we had that planned or it just worked out that way, I'm really excited to be able to talk about Devil's Creek, especially on the tail end of your trip there.
The hands of fate dealt us a good one this week.
Right, yeah.
So I'm really
it's
excited.
Not some terrible coincidental anniversary related to some current event, but something that is I think just more fun, far more exciting and fun to dig into.
Yeah, and everybody was asking about you too, man. So like the next time, if anything like this happens again, I don't care what I have to do. I will buy your plane ticket. Like you're coming with me. Like
Yeah.
you have to have this experience too. And there were so many things that I didn't get to do. I
Yeah.
didn't do any Portage stuff. I talked about some of the people and the places that I missed in my reflection podcast that I did the other day. So I have reason to go back. So many reasons to go back, just solely because of the people, but also because there are more things to do. So you'll be joining me if I have to drag you out of there myself. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, Greg. Well, let's get to the guest for this episode for Devil's Creek.
Yeah. So our guest is fantastic this week. I'm really excited to welcome Kyle Shutt, guitarist extraordinaire from Austin, Texas, metal legends, The Sword and Doom Side of the Moon, and also the host of the Highway with Kyle Shutt, which is a fantastic podcast. Keith, have you ever listened to The Sword? Do you like The Sword?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. I love pretty much all iterations of like the newer eras of Doom bands that worship and pay homage to Black Sabbath in any way. Like I'm pretty much on board with all of those bluesy, heavy, doomy bands.
Me too. And The Sword, I think the first time I ever heard them was on Guitar Hero.
Right. Yeah, that's so cool that they have a song on Guitar Hero.
But it was from their first record too.
Right. Yeah.
And then after that, I got really into the record Warp Riders. Oh man. And then I got to see them live a couple of times. And it's just one of those things where you just groove when they're up there playing. And the riffs are so huge and so wonderful and so catchy. So when Kyle came across my radar as a Propagandhi fan, me being me, I latched onto that, got it, shot him a message. And I was really excited that right around the time I was going to do the interview with him, he also had Todd Kowalski on his podcast, The Highway with Kyle Shutt, which I put in my Spotify playlist of Propagandhi members on other podcasts.
Oh, cool.
So I have a massive Spotify playlist of everybody from Propagandhi on the other podcasts that they've appeared on as guests. So maybe I'll repost that so everybody can check out Todd's conversation with Kyle after this because it's so good. But let's get into this interview with Kyle. And I love that he busted out his guitar in the middle of the interview. So he does a little Kyle Shutt riffing on the show, which is pretty sweet. And so please enjoy my conversation with Kyle Shutt from The Sword and The Highway with Kyle Shutt podcast. Kyle Shutt, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandhi.
Why, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on one of my favorite bands. And I could talk about them all day.
I am so excited. Kyle, why don't you go ahead and just tell the audience who you are real quick, just in case they don't know you and your vast body of work.
Absolutely. My name's Kyle Shutt. I work way too hard on way too many projects, and it never ends. It's great. I'm never going to retire. I'm mostly known for being the guitarist for a band called The Sword, which is like a modern day classic rock stoner thing, whatever you want to call it. We're just a rock band. But also I produced a Pink Floyd heavy metal laser experience called Doom Side of the Moon, which was
that
a heavy metal reimagining of Dark Side of the Moon. It was a lot of fun. It was a fantastically expensive project, but one day I'll probably rev it back up again. And I'm writing a book right now, so hopefully I'll add an author to the list of things pretty soon. And then I also have like a solo career of sorts. You can find all my stuff on Bandcamp and things like that. So I'm just a guitar slinging dumbass that smokes too much weed. And
what about your podcast?
That's the long and short of it. I do have a podcast where I interview all my anywhere from my best friends to my biggest heroes that have agreed to come on. It's been awesome. It's called The Highway with Kyle Shutt. You can find it anywhere podcasts are streamed. But it's funny, doing my own show, I have to be a little bit more reserved as the host because you're obviously right there, like making everything happen. and also so I can let my guests shine a little bit. So it's fun to come on other podcasts. So I can just cut loose, be an idiot,
Well,
and not have to worry about anything.
Kyle, the way I found out that you were a Propagandhi fan is because you recently had Todd on the show. Do you want to talk about collaborating with Todd on your own podcast recently?
Yeah, well, I mean, Propagandhi and me, I guess, or just me liking their band goes back a long way. Way before Todd was even in the band. And I want to say the first time I heard them, I think I bought the Fat Music for Fat People comp, because back in the 90s they had these CD comps from Fat Records, or Punkorama had one, which I think was the Epitaph one. And it's for $3-5 you could get a CD with 35 songs on it with all these rad bands. That's how I found out about so many bands. And I think Propagandhi was track 1 on that first one, or it was one of the very early songs on it, and it hit me right away. The first song on How to Clean Everything.
Yeah.
And it wasn't ska, it wasn't punk, it wasn't metal. It was just this weird thing that didn't sound like anything else on the comp, and I loved it. A friend of mine, I actually think I heard that song, and then a friend of mine had Let's Talk More Rock, and he put that on. I was like, what is this? It's 26 minutes long. I could listen to it on my lunch break, from school. And they were just, they're just rad band that nobody could touch them. And also back in those days, I was living in a really small town in West Texas. And so music was my life. And I didn't really have the opportunity to see many bands live. Especially the more DIY bands that couldn't afford to stop in every podunk little town. So I guess whenever John quit, and Todd joined the band, I can't remember what year that was, but I was
97-ish
somewhere. Yeah, I was already really following the G7 Welcoming Committee label and everything they would put out and all that stuff. And so I had known through their distro about bands like Swallowing Shit and I Spy and all of Todd's bands like that. So whenever he joined Propagandhi, I really appreciated John's melodic contributions to the band that were a little more lighthearted. So when Todd joined, it was just that kind of got taken out and replaced with this white hot anger that just made them it just had more of a pissed off edge than it had before. And it really worked for me at the time. Whenever Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes came out, I was really, really into that record. And I saw them on, I want to say it was the Plea for Peace tour. I talked about it on my podcast, but this lineup was crazy. It was, I think it was J Church, Leatherface, Avail, Propagandhi, Hot Water Music.
Yeah.
There's a couple more in there. It was an absolutely insane show.
I think the tour was actually called Humanitarian Intervention Tour.
Okay, yeah, it's something like that. Yeah.
I have a tour poster with Avail and Fabulous Disaster and Propagandhi on it, just in the wake of the release of Today's Empires over here in my record bin. And so you may have seen that tour. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of tours going around back then. I can't remember
the
name of all of them, but that was a great show. And that was the first time I saw him. That was back in 2000, maybe 2001. And it was just, that was the beginning of it. And then it kind of fast forward years later, the Sword at this point had already been a pretty well established act, and we were able to tour all over the States, all over Canada, everywhere, just kind of anywhere that had electricity. We were able to book a show, and people would show up. And I don't remember how it happened exactly, but we played the Pyramid in Winnipeg, and fucking I can't remember if we reached out to Propagandhi or just said hey, if you want to come to the show, we're playing tonight, or maybe Todd was just there. We said it to somebody, and somebody pointed out, oh my god, dude from Propagandhi's here. You gotta be fucking kidding me.
Awesome.
And went and talked to him. He ended up being a Sword fan and was just happy to be there. He's one of the sweetest people you'll ever meet. He's got no ego at all.
Oh yeah, he's great.
Yeah, and so he's just you ask him a question, he'll tell you an answer. He's a real sweet guy. Yeah. And we just kind of struck up a little casual friendship over the years. So anytime we came through, they would usually come out, and anytime they would play Austin, we would come out. And for a long time, we're really good friends with that band War on Women from Baltimore, who toured with Propagandhi quite a bit.
Yeah. And
they were opening one of those shows. Shauna and Brooks from that band both run a guitar and amp repair shop.
Right. And
they also build amps and stuff. So I had them build me a custom amp one time.
Holy crap.
And I don't know, we've been friends for a long time in that regard. And so it was just all best friends coming together. And I remember we went backstage, met them all, and just said hi because I'd only really met Todd before. And I want to say we're standing down in the crowd at the Mohawk in Austin.
Yeah.
And sold out show. There's probably like 1,000 people there. And Chris was like, "What's up, Austin?" It's like, "Anybody out there like the Sword?" And then like a handful of people were like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Yeah, those guys are rad." Anyway, blah blah blah. We're all just like, what? We just got like 1 million punk points.
Yeah.
I mean, it was hilarious. I don't know. It's like, it's the little things.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. Well, and like there's another little connection here happening. So Todd's been on this podcast. Todd's been on your podcast, but we also had Sue, the bassist from War on Women, was on this podcast as well. She's a massive Propagandhi fan.
Is one of my favorite human beings. I love it. If you're watching, Sue, I love you.
Yeah. And Sue was on the Head, Chest, or Foot episode where we talked about that song from How to Clean Everything. So I love all the weaving stories that happen when you have a podcast like this. All the threads come together. It's so fantastic. Kyle, you were so Today's Empires did the same thing for me, where I was like, okay, I liked Propagandhi a lot, but then Today's Empires came out and it really just took the band to the next level for me. And I think it's because I liked metal so much already before that. And I'm wondering if you came at the band, like what was first for you, like metal or punk rock? Because you're a little more well-known within metal, but I'm wondering how you came at the band, like sound-wise.
I'm a punk at heart, really, in the scheme of things. I came from a like I said, a real small town, and the whole DIY aspect of punk rock, whenever I first, or hardcore, I guess, it was just really appealing to me because like I didn't have any money, mostly. So I had to do it myself. And just the whole scene, the zine scene, and all those kind of punks and everything was just, it was a lot of fun back in those days before the internet. Before Friendster and MySpace kind of like started to scratch the surface of like what social media meant to people. And it was just real communal. There was just shows all the time too, and I was just as into bands like Korn and Pantera on MTV as just as much as I was into like Less Than Jake and Real Big Fish.
Yeah.
And it was just, I just liked everything, but MTV was, and the radio was kind of like it, there was a CD warehouse, and a Circuit City and like things like that where I could buy CDs. But as far as there wasn't like a skate shop that sold Maximum Rock and Roll or Punk Planet or anything like that. I was really on my own for that. So in the early days of the internet, I was able to do a lot of mail order and things like that from like metal labels. Like Robodog Records was a big one for me. That's how I found out about bands like Converge and Circle of Dead Children.
Awesome.
And Pig Destroyer. And then also on the flip side of that, the Epitaph and the Fat Records mail order catalogs. That's how I found out about bands like Frenzel Rom and just it's Strung Out. And that was a whole area of where like punk and metal kind of met in a weird way, Propagandhi didn't really do that for me at first because I've kind of felt like it was more of just like a punk thing, but it wasn't until like Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes came out that I was just like, it's punk, but there's like ripping guitar solos and it's hardcore music, but it's also like really catchy.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like scratched all these itches. So it really did come from like all angles. Like whenever I did, kind of put all those dots together.
I love the fact that, so you're not the only like guy who's sort of known within like a kind of like a stoner metal sound. Like my friend Jeff Owens from the band Goya is a massive Propagandhi fan as well. So he's got this band with a really particular like stonerish kind of rock sound. So I'm loving that there's like a lot of people that like a lot of different styles of music that can kind of all sort of agree on Propagandhi. You know what I mean? I love it.
And it wasn't until, I wanted to say like somebody handed me a Converge CD when I was like 16 or something like that, and that's when I just kind of like turned my back on all the mainstream music and was just like, no, there's a whole scene of people out there that like just do like they just live in houses and just mail records to their fans and just drive around in vans, and it doesn't matter, you don't have to be on the radio, you don't have to do that. It was super eye-opening for me. So they were one of those bands that was like really important for me as a teenager to just show me the way.
What was your Converge intro? Was it When Forever Comes Crashing?
The one before that, Petitioning the Empty Sky.
Oh, is that the one with the saddest song as the opening song?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Saddest Day.
Yeah, The Saddest Day. Oh my gosh, that's the first Converge song I ever heard. I think it was on a Hellfest VHS compilation. And I was like, this is insane. Because my first experience with Converge was seeing them live on a video, not actually listening to the song. So like you can see the audience just go absolutely insane the whole time. It was so cool. Oh my God. Okay. Are any other people in your band Propagandhi fans? Are there any Sword fans or Propagandhi fans in Sword?
Particularly Brian and Jimmy. We all came from that same scene of just DIY punks and stuff in Austin, ska punk, whatever you want to call it. Brian was in a band called Skate or Die that eventually became Pirates of Darkwater, which was more of like, they kind of sounded like the fucking Champs. If you remember that band. And then Jimmy was in a band called Recover. I don't know if you remember that band, but he was the drummer for Recover, kind of back before. I mean, they were one of those bands that just never got big, but for no reason they were just as good as any other band. On Recover's first tour, like their first headlining tour, it was, I think it was it was Coheed and Cambria, Taking Back Sunday, My Chemical Romance, Recover. Like,
I've seen Recover. I saw them live.
On to be like multi-platinum acts, you know what I mean? Yeah, and Recover just for whatever reason never took off. You can't really explain it, but we all came from that same scene, and Propagandhi was just if you know who they are and you see all the other bands that they're in the scene with, like they're clearly running circles around them. From a musical standpoint, at least, and watching their songs are really difficult to play on guitar, and so seeing them live was really important for me because I was like, he's got a capo in the second fret. I see now, you know what I mean? Like that's why I can't figure out that song, you know, and shit like that. So it was they're a very, very technical band for a punk band.
I love it. Well, tell me a little bit about Chris's influence on you as a player. I mean, because you've been listening to them for a long time. So surely, you know, you were listening to Chris as you were growing as a player yourself. Do you have any thoughts or ways or reflections on how he has inspired your own playing over the years?
We have two very different styles, I will say that. But with him, it was more from like a tone standpoint and more of like a fearlessness. Like I said, not from like a technical standpoint of where like I want to play guitar like that. I just like I want to like play guitar in a way that like has its own identifiable style and tone. And he really inspired me to be fearless when it came to like playing guitar solos. Because like, growing up in the 90s, like playing solos isn't cool. You know, and so that really like did me a disservice, like listening to all these grunge bands and everything where like they're kind of mailing in some solos. I was kind of a late bloomer as far as that goes. I really didn't start playing solos and just until I heard them in my head, you know. And so as the Sword kind of progressed and we all started collaborating on writing songs together and stuff like that, I was just like, I hear a crazy guitar solo here. And so I used the guitar as just like an extension of my body, where I just sometimes I tell people like I'm really not that great of a guitar player. I just make the guitar do what I hear in my head. Yeah. And so I think that is more where of like Chris and the band would have like, you know, inspired me to chase that noise in my head.
I love it. Well, Kyle, I know that whenever I reached out to you, you mentioned you're a huge fan of Failed States in particular. And I'm wondering how you feel about the trajectory of the sound, like post Today's Empires, like where the band has gone through Potemkin into supporting cast into Failed States. Tell me about this progression along the way of being a fan, you know, post Today's Empires.
Yeah, it's the sound hasn't like changed so much, or I hate to just say like it's evolved a lot, but again, they just write music. Like I feel like they just write whatever they hear in their heads, and they sometimes will have a very specific story they want to tell. Some things are a little more lighthearted and non-specific. It's tough. Like I want to say what's the first song on supporting cast? That's just like dun, 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 dun,
oh yeah,
dun,
Night Letters.
It's like yeah, Night Letters. That song's ridiculous. I remember when that came out. I say like or something, and he put it on. A little more on the pop side of things, I suppose, and so it's just I don't know. They just kind of do whatever they want, and I really respect that. And it's always shredding. As far as Failed States goes, I don't know. I couldn't really tell you why that one is like hit me the way that it hit me, but it came out at the right time, right when I needed something like that. I want to say like Carcass is one of my favorite bands, and I think it came out around the same time as the Carcass reunion record did, the Surgical Steel, and it was just, I don't know. I'm a big Queensryche fan, and like just like weird metal too and stuff like that, and just however Failed States starts, and just kind of like the trajectory of that record, it just had a real like Queensryche kind of vibe to me. And I was like, if you took Chris's vocals out and put Jeff Tate in there, you'd have a new Queensryche record, no problem, you know.
Wow.
And some of it, you know, really like has that Mindcrime kind of feel to it, where it's just they're weird. They're just a weird band. I love them.
I love it. Well, I love that description as well about Queensryche, because now I'm going to have to go back and revisit some Queensryche and sort of visualize that in my head as I'm listening, because that will reshape the Queensryche experience for myself, I think, you know?
Yeah, they're like fast Queensryche, you know,
I love
with the poignant lyrics. And I don't know. I hate comparing this. I told Todd that, and he said he was like, "Oh my God, all you Propagandhi fans out there, I'm sure I've won CD comp. I guess they like their compilation of all their old demos and stuff like that. Apparently, there's a CD version of it, but the original version was a double 7-inch that I have somewhere in my record collection. But anyway, inside of it, it's got this letter that George had written to Chris, I think, and like in there somewhere he had written that he had gone to go see AC/DC, and Queensryche opened, and he was like, AC/DC was awesome, Queensryche sucked the bag. Just like, it's so funny. But I was like, oh man, that's funny because you guys sound a lot like it.
I love it. Yeah, it's that where quality is job number one, double 7-inch from Recess Records.
Yeah.
That thing is so great. Okay, so Kyle, whenever I reached out to you to be on the show, I threw some songs at you, and you immediately hit me back with talking about Devil's Creek. And I have to explain to you, before we talk about the song particularly, the Devil's Creek is my favorite song on Failed States. And I have avoided doing this episode for a long time because I didn't want to rush this particular episode, because it means so much to me as a fan of this band. And so I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about, I want to talk about the song. I want to talk about music first, and then we can talk about lyrics. But I'm wondering if you can tell me what is interesting to you about this song musically, guitar, bass, drums, anything that springs to mind with your musician brain about why Devil's Creek is an important song musically within this record for you.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of dissonance in music, and Chris and B, I think B was on that record. There wasn't Sue Lin yet. They had a real dissonant style that kind of, they would do things. I brought my guitar on so I could explain it.
Dude, nice.
But you know, I'm going to butcher this riff, but it's it's a really mathy riff that kind of like just chops a lot, doesn't really like kick into a groove until the bridge of the song, which I think is a really smart move. But it's like, can you hear that?
Yeah, sure can.
I think it's like, so like those little like dissonant kind of, however, like they do that kind of shit all the time, and it's always like, it sounds like a really complicated riff, but if you like really think about it, you can do it with like one finger with your hand, just like, I'm butchering it right now, but
no, you're not. It sounds great.
It's just the song just kind of pushes itself forward, and the drums are just like real frantic and all over the place, and just like towards the master of that just kind of frantic tom and snare work. And it's just it starts and stops so many times, it's like getting hit in the head with a hammer listening to this song musically. And then like I said, like by the time it gets to the bridge, it just kind of rides it out for a while. And that's I like songs that don't do the same thing twice. And I think that this particular song is only like 2 minutes long, and
it's short.
They're a lot of the songs in this record are, but they make them, they seem longer than they are, and that's another trick that is I think really important in songwriting. And it's you know, this is a little bit of an aside, but this goes on the Weezer podcast. I'm a big Weezer fan too, not necessarily everything they've ever put out, but they were a huge influence on me as a youth.
I concur.
And there is not a lot of people know about this, but between Pinkerton and the Blue album, there was going to be another album. It was Songs from the Black Hole is what it was called, and most of that album was scrapped because of Matt Sharp doing the Rentals, Return of the Rentals, which like had a lot of like similar themes and like sounds and everything that Rivers was trying to do on Songs from the Black Hole. And the point of Songs from the Black Hole, it was going to be this rock opera where each member of the band was going to play a different role within the opera, and there was going to be a robot, and it would be about a band that like gets in a spaceship and goes and tours outer space. And so Carl, their tech, was going to voice the vocoder robot. They got Rachel and Petra Hayden from That Dog to come in to be the female parts for it. And like that song, I Just Threw Out the Love of My Dreams, was going to be on there. Tired of Sex, things like that. And there's sorry, hang on just 1 second.
You're good.
I might have lost you. Sorry. Decline. Thank you. You got me back.
Yeah, you're
sorry
good.
About that.
You're
sorry.
Good.
Side effect of using my phone. But anyway, there's a song on there called You Won't Get With Me Tonight. On the album that never came out. They basically like did demos for the whole thing, and then we're gonna do it, and then Rivers was heard Return of the Rentals and was like, scrap it all. We're gonna do it's not gonna do the opera anymore. We're gonna write an album about an opera, Madame Butterfly, and you're not in the band anymore, Matt. And it was this whole rift with them, and everything. But anyway, so on this fake album that never got released, you can find demos of it all over the place. There's a song they did called You Won't Get With Me Tonight that has basically like the same chord progression and feel as Devil's Creek. So whenever I first heard that, Devil's Creek is much faster, but it's still got this kind of mathy little like kind of hook thing musically that doesn't make sense and to most people's brains. And yeah, so that was one of those things where I was like, oh man, this song is just like that Weezer song. So go listen to that. Maybe you might hear some of these in there, or maybe not. Maybe I'm just a weirdo.
And there's so many little interesting parts of this song as well. Like whenever Chris where he plays guitar under No One Here But Me, and he like has these little connections within this song as well. It's just the tiniest little stuff that he does throughout the song that has this cohesive whole, but there's so many special little parts. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
I love that.
I mean, that's that dissonance that I'm talking about when he plays those weird little chords under what he's doing. They're just like, I mean, this is just an example, but when you just do a little like, things like that, where it's just like, it's like evil sounding, but pretty at the same time.
I love it. And I'm so glad that you mentioned George's frantic rolls and his fills that he does, because he does a lot of the and then back into the fast beat, and then back to the fast beat, and then so he's got all these little rolls that he throws in that really just fill this thing out so much. And it's like no other Propagandhi song in that regard. Like it's like it's a fast song, but it's got a very unique feel to it on the drums, and it just makes George kind of a special fella. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Love that guy. How do
He's
you
a sweet guy too. Yeah.
How do you feel about the bugs and the nature in the outro? Because it's like 20 seconds after the song ends, where it's just like insects in like a summery soundscape. You know what I mean?
I like putting stuff like that in records. It always feels, I don't know, like sometimes you'll make an album or you're recording a song and you're like, it's done. Then it's time to think about, okay, what else can we put in there? To like, make it a unique listening experience. So it's not just like your album isn't just like 10 songs, start, stop. You know what I mean? I really enjoy albums that like bridge things together with little noises and things like that. So I'm always a fan.
What do you feel about I want to talk about the lyrics now. I love that Chris talks about the sweltering summer days, because like in Manitoba in the summertime, it's like maybe 28 degrees Celsius, like on a hot Manitoba summer day, compared to like Missouri or Texas, where it's 100 plus Fahrenheit. So we're talking about a 20-degree difference. So it's like sweltering for Chris as a kid, but like for you and I, our sweltering is much different. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, he's written about this before. I actually don't know for a fact, but I take it that he grew up on some kind of military base. Is that true or not?
Yeah.
There's been a lot of songs where he talked about that, but I didn't know if that was anecdotal or actual true or whatever. But I really identified with the lyrics of this song just because I kind of grew up in a not a similar manner, but as far as like not being able to identify with the adults in my life, not really being able to identify with the people my same age, just feeling really alone and outcast and fucking like I just couldn't wait to just leave home, and just go out there and find my people. And that was kind of like it's one of their less political songs, I suppose. It's not there a particular it doesn't really necessarily. It's just it's way more of like an autobiographical, kind of like more emotional tune, and I appreciate that from them.
Yeah. Did you? I'm wondering because I'm thinking about my own Devil's Creek essentially. Like I grew up in St. Louis,
Mm-hmm.
and behind my house there was a giant sewer like drainage spot essentially where all the sewers in the neighborhood would dump into this creek that ran through the back of the neighborhood, and my house backed right up to that spot. And so I essentially had my own version of Devil's Creek in my backyard behind my parents' fence. It was right there. And people would go down there and smoke cigarettes because you could stand inside the giant sewer and everything.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you had a version of Devil's Creek, like in your own life, a place where you could go where you could get some solace and like kind of feel like a little adventurous. You know what I mean?
Somewhat. I grew up in West Texas where it's just flat. You know what I mean? You can see 8 miles in any direction, and the mesquite only comes up to about your knees. And so it's really hard to hide anywhere. You kind of have to like really go out far away from home to like that weird spot in the middle of the field that like they found a couch and there's a couple of just somebody got some cigarettes or something like that. So there's a weird porno mag they found like hidden under a bush or whatever, and that's kind of not necessarily a creek per se, but there was definitely like some places like that. But I like that he brought it up like that. I think the last line of the song is like if I'm like I can't remember how word for word how it goes, but if it's like if I seem like I'm staring off into space, it's because I'm in Devil's Creek, like in my mind. You know what I mean? That's kind of like where he goes, to escape within himself. That's how I interpreted it anyway.
I love it. So I'm wondering about what this band means to you as like a fan of music, because obviously I love this band so much that I've started a podcast about every single one of their songs. So it's like an absurd degree that I connect with this band. And I'm wondering like if what kind of special place they hold within your own life as a fan of music and a musician yourself.
Yeah, they're just a band that I could put on anytime, and I don't have to be in the mood for them. Sometimes I have to like, something will strike my fancy and I can only listen to it like at a certain time. But Propagandhi, I can just put them on any time. They're great. They've been there throughout the phases of my life, too. So it's like if I want to feel nostalgic, I put on some old records. If I want to hear the Victory Lap, put that on. Like it's just the first riff, I can't remember the name of the song. It might be Victory Lap, the first track on that. It's just like as soon as that came out, a ton of people were texting me. They're like, that new Propagandhi sounds like the Sword, man.
It does.
That riff in the beginning, it kind of does like a little bit. Not saying they jacked it at all. I just mean like it's just got that feel to it. So I don't know, they're a great band, a lot of great feels to it, and they also have a sense of humor that I think people don't think, like casual fans might not necessarily notice. Like some of the most brutal songs they have are on Failed States, but then they also have that song Stuff I Like, which I think I asked if you wanted to do that one.
Yeah.
Because it's just such a lighthearted, rad song. It's like this like pissed off song. It's just like, I like this. It's like all a song about stuff he likes. I think they got great sense of humor. And also just they're not afraid to shy away from, controversial political opinions just because, I don't know, of what might be considered for the greater good at the moment or whatever. Like whenever they got in that whole thing with Fat Mike over the Bush comp back in like the early 2000s, you know what I mean? I could. It was funny. I could appreciate both sides of the argument, but it's just I I did appreciate them being like, you know what, we're not comfortable with this. We're not going to be on your anti-Bush comp. You know, it's like we're anti everything. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's just
I'm wondering if you had so we've done so many episodes, and so now what I'm running into is whenever I invite people to come on the show, like a lot of their favorite songs are taken. Like you can't be on the episode for so
Right.
many songs that this band has done now because we already did those episodes. And I'm wondering if you had your pick of the whole entire discography, what other songs you may have wanted to jump on and for whatever reason.
Yeah. I'm really bad with song titles. What's the one? State Lottery, something like that. Let's Talk More Rock. What is that? Just what it's called? State Lottery.
State Lottery.
Brutal. And also track 3 on How to Clean Everything. I can't remember what it's called.
Is that Hate Myth Muscle Etiquette?
Yeah. God, that song is absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Nice.
Just like punk metal, that kind of thing. You know what I mean? It was just like hardcore and melodic at the same time, and it's just, I don't know, it's fucking, they're such a great band. I don't know, there's a bunch. With Friends Like These, Who the Fuck Needs COINTELPRO?
Yes.
There's another one on there. There's another one. God damn it. Oh, I'm trying to recall without looking it up. Family. So it's on Today's Empire, Tomorrow's Ashes. It's called like, it's like track 5 or something. Do you know off the top of your head?
I'm actually just gonna look. I got the thing here. Let's see. Is it Natural
So
Disasters?
What name a couple more?
Was it Natural Disasters?
Name a couple more.
Albright Monument, Baghdad. Ordinary people do fucked up things when fucked up things become ordinary. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that one's great. Oh man, I love that song. Yeah. I would pick that one maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, that one's like,
is just special. It's like, I don't know, that record came out when we were like, I think we were in Europe, and like I got this, I think I might have downloaded it, and like we're listening to it on the tour bus. I just got a lot of memories associated with Failed States, so that's kind of why I wanted to pick that record.
I love it. Well, Kyle, do you have any more like Propagandhi stories of seeing them live or anything like that, or interactions that you wanted to mention before I let you get back to your day today?
Well, I will. I got to give a shout out to my friend Cece, who runs a vegan bakery here in Austin, Zucchini Kill. If there's a band that she likes, she'll usually put together a cake. Yeah, but Kathleen Hannah's okay with it too. So that was good. But she'll always bake a cake or put together like a care package or whatever for whatever bands are coming through town. And she's this real cute little girl. She's probably like, I'm sorry, Cece, if you're listening, but maybe you're 4'10". I don't know. She's a little teapot. But
Hi,
she made this cake for Propagandhi one time. Yeah, right. And so she was, I know Todd, okay, but the rest of the band, you just, casually met them here and there and stuff like that. But when her and her friend came upstairs to the Mohawk, they had this cake, and they're like, hey, Kyle, do you think it'd be weird if like we walked in there and just like gave him this cake? I was like, it's no, like these 2 cute little girls that like made a vegan cake for Propagandhi. I was like, come right this way. I think I like walked right by the security guard. I was like, sorry, man, we'll be out of here in 2 seconds. I'm so sorry, and walked in, just kind of introduced him, said hi, and then I ran just in case shit got weird. But no, it was they were super gracious. You could tell they were all just like, oh, free cake. Who doesn't like free cake, especially when you're vegan and somebody took the time out of their day to, accommodate that request. I guess it's a little more common these days than it used to be, I guess, but still, that was funny. So I hope you enjoyed the cake, boys.
I love it. Well, Kyle Shutt, The Sword.
Thanks again for having me on, man.
Take me back to those sweltering summer days, down the gravel road to the creek outside the base. Sun on skinny arms, chin on knobby knees, squatting in the cold of the rotting of the reeds enveloping. No one here but me never understood the other kids, the adults even less, so I hung out by myself in a back road drainage ditch. I called it Devil's Creek so it wouldn't seem so sad, When you can't have what you want, you learn to want what you have. These adoptive preferences have their way with you, shape world events. In the wake of an ancient shallow late Cretaceous sea, this side of a clay-packed extinction boundary, this biome breathing, buzzing, howling in the heat. If I seem like I'm somewhere else, it's Devil's Creek.
All right. Thank you so much to Kyle Shutt from The Sword and the Highway with Kyle Shutt podcast for coming on and hanging out, chatting Devil's Creek, chatting Propagandhi. I love that obscure Weezer reference that he dropped in the middle of it. So thanks, Kyle. You're just a joy to talk to. And I also loved the War on Women shout outs in that interview and Kyle's guitar playing and all the musical knowledge that he sort of drops about guitar playing within there. So thanks, Kyle, so much. And we just had a cover as well. After the interview with Kyle, the cover that let us back in here after Kyle's chat was sent in by our buddy Lang Huck, who lived just outside of St. Louis, Missouri. So Missouri, what's up? That was a haunting little ditty that Lang sent in, wasn't it? Kind of gloomy and lo-fi and basement and droning and kind of weird. So Lang has a bunch of tunes on his Bandcamp at doublehellddeathmatch.bandcamp.com, which he describes as lo-fi anxiety out of Hillsboro, Missouri, which you should all look up on Street View or something, Hillsboro, Missouri and Fenton, Missouri. Like I grew up around those parts and it's a pretty interesting area. So you could go for a little Street View walk in Hillsboro, Missouri and see where that tune came from. So Keith, what should we start with on our Devil's Creek episode?
Well, since you talked about the music with Kyle, I think that makes sense to share some thoughts about it now. And, you know, as metallic and as heavy and oftentimes cold, sometimes people will describe Failed States as, I don't always get that vibe from this song. There seems to be more life and energy, perhaps because the lyrics themselves aren't as heavy or as daunting, but the thrashiness and the tempo, the melodies and the changing aspects of like the guitar and drums throughout this track, I think has it stand out lyrically and musically, perhaps more alongside things I like than some of the other like darker tracks on the record, whether by Chris or by Todd.
I love the idea of pairing this with Things I Like as the two least dark songs on the record. I agree with that because like if you think about most of their records, there usually are moments of light within them.
Bangers Embrace, right? Yeah,
exactly. And like obviously like Gifts from Less Talk More Rock, Call Before You Dig, from Victory Lap. So they've got these moments of brightness, and I see this one as a moment of brightness as well. So I kind of see this song has got a couple of chunks. Okay, so we got our 20-second intro here. We've got the 14-second outro,
right,
with the insects. And then so the meat of this song is about 155 in between the intro and the 14-second outro. And the song to me has like two major parts, like almost like miniature movements, if you will. So we have the first minute 17 and then the last minute. So the first minute 17 is fast ripper. The second minute, or the final minute of the song is a slower. The speed backs off. The speed never comes back either, which is something most other fast bands tend to do. So when you think about what a lot of punk bands do, they start fast, they get slow, then they bring the speed back. And I like that this song never gets fast again because it feels appropriate for the epicness of the ancient late Cretaceous sea in the lyrics. You know what I mean? I like that it starts fast, and I like that it gets slow, and then I really like that it never gets fast again. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, for sure. And Greg, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because while I know that, because I know the song, it's one of my most listened to albums of all time. It's my favorite album of all time. I don't think I ever really acknowledged or noticed that, even if I, listened to it and heard it never pick back up. It definitely fits in with the themes, with this contemplative aspect of the lyrics, to where it doesn't need to be like super like ripper again. Yeah.
Yeah. And so let's talk about the drums a little bit. Okay.
Cool.
My favorite part of this song is what Jord does. In my view, the snare fills are the glue that holds the song together. Let me give you an example. I love the snare fills on this song. So I love the fact that there's this recurring fill in the fast parts of the song that make this song like utterly unique. Okay. We've got those take me back to those sweltering summer days, where it's one little fill followed by a fill that's twice as long as the first fill. So it's the short fill, and then So I know it might sound ridiculous that that's what I think makes the song totally special, but it just is. That fill appears in the intro, verse 1, verse 2, verse 3. It's there every time. It's like this recurring glue that weaves the song together from verse to verse. And so I just love that snare fill that really gives this a special feel musically. And obviously there's that core riff and everything that the song is based around. But the snare fill to me is just as important because it ties together each section just as much as that core riff does. So I really love that little fill. Do you know the fill I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah. And it reminds me a little bit of what Jord does at the end of Duplicate Keys.
Ooh.
And I think I had noticed that more. But as soon as you mentioned it, I had that playing in my head. So it is iconic, even if it didn't necessarily come to mind in writing down things for my notes. But yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. And, as somebody who grew up playing drums, to like, I latch onto those little moments. Like if somebody would grow up playing guitar, they would obviously say that the core glue that holds this song together is Chris's core riff that repeats throughout the song. But to me, it's those snare fills, which is just like the simplest thing, but it's a really unique way that he does the short fill and then the double and then double that length. So it goes da da da, and I just love that. But the snare work also reminds me of when the main riff comes in on In Flagrante Delicto.
Oh yeah,
where he goes. Right. So it's got that same kind of feel to Flagrante on Victory Lap, which I love, but there's also these huge toms in the intro where he's just riding on these toms. And then in the little transition part at around 48 to 50 seconds that are so awesome. So this is not like Jord's most technically impressive song on the drums. These aren't his most like technically impressive parts across the Propagandhi discography. But those big tom rolls just sound huge. So I like the fact that he went for a booming, room-filling sound over technically precise rolls on those connective parts within the song where Chris is just riffing really, really hard, especially between 48 and 50 seconds in the song. So I really like the very unique feel for this song on drums. Like even though they're not, like I said, as technically like precise and mind-blowing as some of his other parts. I really appreciate the bigness that he went for on this song, as opposed to like teeny tiny little precise parts like you might find in some of those fills on like Duplicate Keys, where he's like hitting on that hi-hat during fast fills and stuff. This song's not like that to me. It's just more room filling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's especially noticeable in the remastered version. I think the drums sound very, very far more crisp, far more natural in the 2019 release.
Yeah, and I've got some thoughts on the guitar here as well.
Cool.
So the guitars are all in standard tuning.
Crazy to think, because this song is like heavy.
Yeah, it rips. So obviously I love the opening riff. It's got that whammy bar dive on a hammer-on pull-off combo that gives that really booming opening sound into that lick. So that first second is I'm just like, what the heck was that? It's almost like some kind of computer generated sound effect. It's so memorable, and then it goes into that lick. It's so memorable. It's a clear hook. You can't forget it once you hear it. And it's just so cool. And I was looking at the Sheet Happens book about that lick. And the amazing thing about the core of this opening lick is its simplicity. It's 3 plucks on an open A string, followed by open and then second fret and then open on the G string. Dun 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 na 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 dun 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 na na na.
Oh wow, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. It sounds far more complex and heavier than that.
Truly. So I'm bringing it down to its lowest common denominator, because obviously he takes that lick and goes other places with it.
Right.
But if you just go dun 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 na 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 dun 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 na na na, anybody can do that. That just that one part. Like I did it on my acoustic guitar like 10 times yesterday just to make sure that I was actually not fooling myself. Like I was like, can I actually do that? And I go dun 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 na na na, and I did it. And I was like, holy smokes, there it is. So obviously there are more parts that fill in the space around that, which you can watch if you go see Clem's Last Note video playthrough, which is, I mean, this song rips obviously, but the core lick is just the simplest, sweetest little thing. And it's one of those moments where they fool you and you think that they're doing this insane thing, but it's really just a less is more moment, which I loved. So it's ultra catchy, and it could have been written by any era of the band. They could go dun 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 na 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 on How to Clean Everything also, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a timeless riff. Do you have any thoughts on the licks or the riffs within the song?
You know, you mentioned In Flagrante. That song comes to mind. The funeral procession comes to mind, where it is metallic and thrashy, but again, not necessarily as just oppressive as some of the other heavier tracks. And it just has a life and energy to it that is clearly melding their taste in metal, but also with like their own personal history. Like that explanation of hearing this on Less Talk, you know, with a different tone and maybe a different tempo.
Yep.
I 100% could hear that. And if you would have said that yesterday, I never would have thought that on my own. So, you know, it's just amazing to see the things pieced together to create a sound that's so distinctly them. And, you know, I've run into a lot of people who they see a Propagandhi shirt, they'll say, oh, like, I didn't know they were still a band. I'm like, oh, they're amazing. And they're even better now than when you listen to them, you know, even before me. But, you know, this is one of the songs that if someone stopped listening and they only heard How to Clean It, Everything, I would probably play this.
Yeah.
Because I think musically it's very distinct. But also lyrically, it's such an outlier. I think the lyrics are very audible and they're discernible. And this would just be such a curveball to that 90s punk crowd who didn't keep up with them. But it captures what the band has done so well for the last, you know, obviously more than a decade, but ever since this record came out.
Yeah, you know, and there's other parts of the song where Chris lines up a different chord strike to a different word or syllable of parts in this song. Like it's really striking when you look at the transcription for Sheet Happens. Like he hits a different single chord strike under the line, learn to want what you have. These adaptive preferences have their way with you, shape world events. And it's a different chord on every one of those syllables that I was just saying. That I was saying that way on purpose, because every one of those syllables, he's hitting a different chord. And so it's just like dun, 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 dun. And it's just really, really cool. And I love Beeves' really chill guitar solo in the entire outro over Chris's core riff leading to the buzzing of the insects. That Beeves solo is really cool. And it really just transitions so smoothly into that buzzing. It's like almost like his guitar solo outro is the buzzing. You know what I mean? It's like he's trying to emulate the buzzing of the insects in that solo into the actual buzzing of the nature sounds. And I really like that. It's got this massive whammy bar and feedback section at the conclusion of the solo too, which just hits so hard in headphones at high volumes. And the vibrato is so good. But this is one of those parts that like really just like rings and fills a room live too with that outro solo. I'm just so glad the band has expanded to 2 guitars for the second era of the band, essentially. But you know, after seeing this flawlessly performed in Winnipeg a couple of times over the past weekend, the outro is so huge, and it's just a glorious ending to this song. So I love seeing it live. So glad that they continue to play it live.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's crazy to think, Greg, that how dynamic of a guitarist and musician the Beeve is, to where he is a technical player, but he also has this knack for creating layers and atmospheres, like these sometimes unsettling sounds that work within the tracks. And that's all over Failed States for sure. Certainly supporting cast as well. But I agree. I think those ideas are clearly connected lyrically, but also with the sample at the end. And this might sound strange, but when I first bought this record and, I was listening to it nonstop, whenever it came to the end and the music stopped and with those insects, there's something in my brain that would make me go stock personnel, front checkout. And, from Back to the Motor League.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I don't know if it's just musically, it sounds a little similar at the end. Like, but in reviewing and listening to it a few times this week to prepare, I know I remembered that I did that, in 2012, 2013, all the time. So I say that pretty much whenever the song ends. Yeah. Which is also weird because the lyrics are so different. And there's that, the sound of the insects. It's the opposite of being in, a store or a job like that. But
yeah. Well, and I got to talk a little bit about Todd too on this tune.
For sure.
Yeah. Like, I've always loved the bass recording on Failed States, because besides the bass on Less Talk More Rock, which is so obviously clear for its extremely unique tone, which I realized the other day is identical to the tone on No Effects So Long Thanks for All the Shoes, oddly enough. Probably not a coincidence. I think that Failed States has the most listener-friendly recording and mix of bass, where you can really follow the bass with just a tiny bit of extra attention. Whereas you can't always do that on records. Like sometimes it's hard to follow the bass, but I love the recording of the bass on Failed States. I just love it because Todd is so clear. And I looked up the gear used for this record just for fun. And it was an Ibanez Soundgear bass model SR 1500, an Ampeg SVT classic head, an Ampeg 8x10, medium gauge strings, and an Exotic Effects bass BD preamp. But my standout bass moment on this song is under the lyric Shape World Events. It's a beautiful little ditty.
That's a great run.
Yeah, it's a great little run. So I love that little section as well, which is my thoughts on the bass for this song.
And I echo that, Greg. Listening to a lot of extreme music and not being a musician, not necessarily always having the ear for production, bass can oftentimes just get, washed over by everything else. And that's certainly not the case on this record, especially the remastered version, that he is up in the mix. It's clear, it's memorable. It's easy to pick out, not just as Todd, what he's playing, but how it fits in with everything else, like the recording and the sound aspects, but also the composition and the performance is really incredible.
Yeah, JP Peters and Jason Livermore did a really great job with the bass on this record. And obviously Todd playing it. And the 14 seconds of insects and natural sound that close out the tune are really evocative imagery. And it truly does ring a specific memory for so many people out there of what it means to be young, to be an explorer. For me, it means like being with my friends in the back of my house in Fenton, Missouri, when I was a kid. Like, I really can picture being behind my childhood yard's fence, standing at the edge of a creek, listening as bugs scream in the August Missouri sunset twilight air. I mean, so I guess with that said, we should get into the lyrics, shouldn't we?
Yeah, that's a perfect transition.
Keith, tell me what is your Devil's Creek?
Oh, man, I had a feeling you're going to ask me that, Greg.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you shared so much about the actual Devil's Creek. You know, I mentioned I didn't really look up too much. And I like hearing details about what inspired Chris to write the song. But for me, the purpose of it is more about thinking about your own private spaces. As mundane as they may appear to be, they still hold personal, historical, or geological significance. So I guess if I think of what most parallels Chris's lyrics here, a place to me that would be important to me by myself to think, to get away. My own Devil's Creek is either the field, which I would use as like a proper noun. We called it the field behind my house growing up in Maryville, Indiana, or the creek right next to it that separated my street and the field from an apartment complex right on the border between Maryville and Gary, Indiana. The field is, I would guess, 3 acres or so, just a low clay-filled plain that eventually had a berm built around it after a really big flood in like 91 or 92, which flooded our basement at my house where I grew up. And I would walk through and look for flowers and 4-leaf clovers. I'd wander around. I'd ride my bike in the field or up and down the hill, the berm. I'd go over to one of the playgrounds over the berm, one built in the 70s, like super old, just a slide, monkey bars and swings. And then there was a more modern playground just over there. The field didn't have any trees, so it was really open. And that's distinct in such a densely populated place. Like, I mean, Indiana probably doesn't necessarily evoke dense population, but it where I live functions as an offshoot of Chicago's suburbs. So it's a pretty densely populated spot, in terms of, suburbia. So just being in like an open place with nothing else around it for a couple acres is pretty distinct. And I'd also explore the creek, which is also like a proper noun, that was just on the north side of the field. I'd take toys over there. I'd try to jump across it. And funnily enough, like looking at it now on Google Maps, because I just thought to bring it up and compare how I remember it with what it is today. It's not a creek. I assumed it just extended both directions, like it ran for a mile or more, but it's, I think, just a drainage ditch between my block and that apartment complex. So it's really only the length of the field, but in my head, it went further in both directions.
And I think that actually mirrors pretty closely what Chris's
right.
is too. Did you look at his Patreon video for Devil's Creek?
I didn't watch the video, no.
Oh, you gotta do that right later on today. My Devil's Creek was literally behind my house.
Yeah.
We had, so whenever our neighborhood was built in like 1980, before any houses were built, they laid a massive sewer system all throughout what was going to be a brand new neighborhood complex, where they ran all the underground concrete sewer pipes for stormwater runoff. And so the whole neighborhood runs downhill, and the storm drain, which was 6 feet across, was right behind my house.
Mm.
So whenever it would storm really, really hard, I would go out on my back deck and you could hear
6
just,
feet.
yeah, huge, like a huge sewer opening. And whenever it would rain super hard, all the water in the neighborhood would run through this network of pipes that would drain out into an actual creek right behind my house. And if it would rain super hard, you would go out on the deck and you would just hear this roaring water walk down to the back of the yard, and this like torrent of water would be just blasting out of the end of this pipe. Like, it was really amazing. I'll never forget it. So that was right behind my house. It was a drainage sewer that collected all the stormwater from my entire neighborhood. It was 6 feet high and opening. It was right behind my fence in my backyard, and there was a creek that carried out from the opening. So obviously, this was a very, very attractive spot for kids in the neighborhood, because you could go and stand inside this sewer opening whenever it was dry and have privacy from the prying eyes of adults. So kids were down there smoking weed, drinking, smoking cigarettes, hanging out, like literally just sitting in the sewer opening constantly. It was a big, attractive nuisance, essentially. And what we also could do is, if you walked into the sewer with flashlights and just kept going, you could walk the entire length of the sewer system in the neighborhood, and you could pop out of a sewer lid at the very, very top of the neighborhood on the highest point of the subdivision itself. So it was about 1.5 miles, I think, of sewer that you could walk through with flashlights, and then you could just pop out of a sewer lid on the other side of the neighborhood. I mean, it was really wild. And one time my friends and I even put a canoe in the creek when the water level was high, and we literally would just sit in the canoe behind my fence in this water. I can still picture absolutely everything about how that creek looked back in the early and mid 90s. And honestly, like, I regularly, like, almost like emotionally pine for that spot. And the last week or so, thinking about this song, I can't stop thinking about this sewer opening that was behind my childhood home. So if anybody out there listening in St. Louis wants to pilgrimage to my Devil's Creek, all you got to do is you got to go to Fenton, Missouri, and you go to 1759 Praise Boulevard in Fenton, Missouri, walk between the houses down to the bottom of the hill directly behind the house, and you will be at my Devil's Creek. I honestly wish I could afford a house on that street, because I would just buy a house there just to regain a semblance of connection to my youth, because like right now I don't have much. And that is like the place for me, dude. So like I can't ever since this song has come out, like every time this song comes on, I picture that sewer opening.
Yeah. Well, Greg, let's get into the specific lyrics here. The very first line is, "Take me back to those sweltering summer days, bike down the gravel road to the creek outside the base."
Yeah. So I have a little bit of just observation about this. If you look at the street view of Devil's Creek in Southport, Manitoba, like the one that Chris refers to in the song, you can see the air base in the distance. So this is literally just outside the base. So this is a literal lyric. And on Patreon, Chris traces the path that he would ride his bike from his childhood home to the drainage ditch. Like, he literally traces it with his mouse cursor on his computer screen. And if you've ever been to the Canadian prairies, there is nothing like it. It's so wide open. The sky is so big. You've never seen a bigger, more vast and distant sky than if you're standing in the middle of a field in Manitoba or Saskatchewan. There's the gentlest roll to the fields. Oftentimes there's these tiny yellow flowers that are distinct for canola plants, which canola oil, like the spray for anti-sticking when you're cooking, that's where it comes from. And it's unmistakably Saskatchewan or Manitoba. And I've never been anywhere like it before or since I was in Saskatchewan. So interestingly, though, a sweltering day, like I talked about with Kyle, in rural Saskatchewan, was like 82 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 28 Celsius. which is an easy conversion to make. 82 flips to 28. So if you're looking for an easy Fahrenheit Celsius conversion, it's 82 to 28. So you just flip that number. With a decent amount of humidity. So when I think of sweltering, I think of 100-degree Fahrenheit days in Missouri in July when it feels like your face is cooking and it's 90% humidity. So my visual of a sweltering day is a little different than Chris probably. But the reason this line hits me so hard is because I have an intense fondness for summer. The very long daylight hours, the warm, dark night with bug sounds, the feeling for me of being like at Lake of the Ozarks on weekends in middle school, sitting under the dull yellow bulbs of my dad's boat dock, which was on a gravel road in the middle of Missouri. And like I would walk up and down those gravel roads at the Lake of the Ozarks when my friends were all back in St. Louis hanging out without me. And in my mind, they were having the best time ever without me there. And I was like stuck at this lake, like 3 hours from home alone, walking up and down gravel roads. So this line evokes like feelings of isolation, being away from my friends when I just wanted to be back in St. Louis with all of them, you know?
Yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned the actual like location and the connection to the military base, because for me visually, without looking it up, I really pictured a flat, vacant land defined by empty space. And in a similar way, the access to what I might consider to be nature untouched by humans in Northwest Indiana is definitely there. There's a connection. I mean, there's not a ton of that where I lived growing up or where I live now. I mean, my childhood was defined by the subdivision that I lived in. We didn't have pristine wilderness accessible by length or time on a kid's bike. So we had to invent those places by imparting meaning and value onto, say, the field or the creek that just bordered it. And I grew up on a dead end street with a public pool just across the street. So those sweltering days, I spent just as much time playing in the slow parking lot of that pool, pretending to do bike tricks or staring through the barbed wire fence into the pool facility during the off hours. And, I think of like the long hours as well and the sound of bugs, but also seeing kids riding their bikes down my street with their towels wrapped around their necks like capes, headed to the pool for a day of swimming. And the sound of lifeguards, like clearly audible from my backyard, blowing their whistles. And my parents didn't always have money to send us. And of course, we would have gone every day if we could. So we got to go a few days each summer. So a lot of those sweltering summer days for me were spent playing in the sprinkler in the front yard, watching longingly as cars and bikes came down my street to head to the pool.
Man, now I'm thinking about this memory of how my neighborhood like didn't have a pool, but a lot of my friends lived at 2 subdivisions over who had like a neighborhood community pool that they would all go to. And I would just like wait for the phone to ring. Be like, hey, you want to go to the pool? And then I would like get on my bike and try to go over to their neighborhood. But I had to wait for the invitation. Right. You know what I mean? So it's like oh my gosh, I just want to go to that pool, but they have to invite me to go. So we have this next line: sun on skinny arms, chin on knobby knees, squatting in the cool of the rotting of the reeds enveloping. And dude, like that's me he's describing. When I was like 13, I was like 6'4" and like 125 pounds soaking wet. Like my body was just like, my knee joints were wider than my quad muscles. Like when I was 17, like my name at the record store I worked at was Skinny because I looked ridiculous. I spent so much time in this body wishing I had a different body. You know what I mean? Like everyone goes through periods of body issues. I think like dysphoria to a certain extent with some folks, myself included, and like describing the difficulty of existing in one's own body, being consigned to this body, which we never asked for. We never asked to be born. We never had a choice of which body we live these lives inside of. So I see like a lot of myself in this song of that Chris is talking about.
Yeah, same for me, Greg. And what a mental picture that line paints, not just the setting itself, but the language used to describe Chris, that also in many ways describes you, but also me. Like my grandma used to tell me if I turned sideways and stuck out my tongue, I'd be a zipper. And my stepdad said that my ears look like a 57 Chevy going down the road with the doors open. So that awkward depiction of youth certainly hits home. If it's my own self-awareness or consciousness, or my family's proclivity to ridicule, sometimes lighthearted and other times maybe not so much. But as people are coming into themselves, they're awkward. I always think of just like a German Shepherd puppy that has grown too quickly and just can't move. Right? It seems to be all feet just flopping around.
Mm-hmm.
And when I with the reeds, I've always pictured the cattails growing by the creek in the field behind my childhood home, listening to this. And this is also a good line to point out that I used Devil's Creek to teach figurative language.
Oh, interesting.
So back when this record first came out, I think 2013. So in teaching seventh grade, I had a lesson on figurative language. After defining each type and identifying students, I had the class choose one song to share that relied heavily upon things like similes and metaphors. And this is the song that I picked and played in class to model that activity. And this line alone makes use of things like imagery. There's consonants, alliteration, and maybe even personification with the word enveloping as I picture the landscape, hugging Chris.
I absolutely love that. And as a person who has taught middle school and high school English myself, I could see myself doing that for a creative writing lesson, like leading to the creation of short stories or vivid poetry. So then we have this next line. No one here but me never understood the other kids, the adults even less. So I hung out by myself in a back road drainage ditch, which I originally misheard as backyard drainage ditch, listening to the song. So that was my misheard section. I called it Devil's Creek so it wouldn't seem so sad. And I don't get the impression, I think that my childhood has some similarities with Chris in a few ways from what I can tell, but I get the impression he was a tad bit lonelier than me. I don't think that my childhood really mirrors Chris's that much with regards to understanding adults and other kids so much. I feel like I had some decent friendships. I feel like Chris's childhood in Southport, Manitoba was a lot more isolated than my experience growing up in the suburbs of St. Louis, which is a huge city, and in which I grew up going to Blues games and Cardinals games and like playing sports all the time. And like I was around people all the time. I tended to have some pretty good friends, several of whom I'm still very good friends with, and the kinds of friends that I can like call, I can see tomorrow and click with instantly, even if I haven't seen them in a while. But like, I do remember desperately wanting to be liked all through school and like pining for my phone to ring, and I'd call people that I really wanted to like me, and they would never be home and they would never call me back. And like, I envision that's what it felt like for Chris sitting at Devil's Creek. Like, why didn't anyone call me? Why am I not enough for someone to think about me and call me and consider that I might want to do things? So in my brain, like I would call these people who I like desperately wanted to be liked by, who in retrospect were very much not people I should have been hanging out with or craving their attention. But like in my mind, they were having the greatest lives ever. And I was having the crappiest life ever, like filled with loneliness, while they were out having all these like awesome fun times, like not even caring that I even existed. And to this day I struggle with feelings like that, but I know for a fact that some of my friends now think about that too. And so I feel less alone in those feelings now, but growing up being like, why won't my phone ring? Why won't they call me back? Did his mom tell him I called? It's just like this consumption of doubt about and loneliness of like, why am I not good enough? So what if I'm sitting around feeling sorry for myself and not getting calls? Like, it's really hard. Like, human relationships are very complicated, delicate. And I wished my whole life that it was a little simpler. Like, if If I called somebody, they would answer, or they would call me back, and we could actually do fun things. So I see a lot of my own youth in this song.
My own story, Greg, probably mirrors your more than Chris's. Yeah, I think my time in the field or the creek was mostly spent with kids from my neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes my older brother. It wasn't really, they weren't really places to seek out isolation, feeling like I didn't fit in, or that I was misunderstood, or that I didn't like other people, because I was probably more of a follower wanting to impress, entertain, or be liked by others, rather than questioning the motives, the words, or the actions of individuals at a younger age. I liked being around other people and never felt too much like an outcast until, I would say, middle school, when the complexity of school / social life became exponentially more complicated. And part of me wonders if Chris really thought those places were sad, or if that's colored perhaps by his knowledge of the place now compared to the various places that he's been able to visit or live in. I mean, at least for me, I thought the field and the creek behind my house were pretty neat, because I saw so little of the world and so little of the natural world that it would never really have occurred to me that those two places would pale in comparison, even to other things nearby, like prairies or dunes, beaches, or savannas. So I didn't really have to reconcile and think like, well, this is all I have, because I just appreciated it for what it was.
Yeah. And we have this next line, which is these next couple of lines are really interesting. And I had to think really hard about them. So the first one is, when you can't have what you want, you learn to want what you have. So this is an intriguing line to me. It's like Chris wanted to just fit in with the people around him. Like, why am I so weird? So if Chris had this epiphany that everyone else can just go on with their day regardless of his existence, it puts him in the situation of almost having no choice to make. He has no choice to make about continuing to pine for those people who don't care to notice him, or he can make a conscious choice to change and find his own way. Like, it's a really painful line if you think about it, like a small boy making peace with his own isolation. And it's almost too overwhelming to me to think about now, because all I see is a kid who needs someone to love him, to accept him, to hug him. But the bravery of a child to accept their isolation, and that's some like wisdom beyond your years. You know what I mean? And to forge a new path and go on to do what Chris Hanna has done is really pretty fantastic. It just gives credence to the view that if we can get people through the painful and confusing years of childhood into adulthood, the paths that can open up are, there are so many. But it connects to this next line. These adaptive preferences have their way with you, shape world events. And I've never really thought about this line. I never looked up what it meant. And now that I've like researched it a little bit, I'm like, dang, Chris is kind of like a smart fella. It's an elaboration from the previous line, which now makes a lot more sense after using my brain to untangle this puzzle. And did you have to Google adaptive preferences also?
Yeah, that is one of the lyrics that always eluded me, or I just never looked it up before until this week.
Yeah. And so I'll tell you what I found, and then you can tell me what you found. So I Googled it, and I found the definition as something along the lines of this. In some sense, all our preferences develop and adapt in response to our environment. Adaptive preferences are those preferences which have adapted in such a way as to make them irrational or otherwise unreliable in reflecting our actual attitudes. So, for example, an example of adaptive preferences, there's like a fable of a fox and grapes, where a fox realizes he can't reach the grapes he desires. So rather than admit defeat, the fox says, oh, they look sour and I don't want them anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So Chris wants friends, I think, and wants to be liked and desires companionship at Devil's Creek. But seeing that other people don't want to be with him, he just adapts and says, they don't get me anyway, so why bother? And he goes to hang out by himself, which is an avoidance of his actual desire for companionship. But that's just how I read it. I'm curious what you found.
Yeah, Greg, I think even with the connection with Todd's description that you read at the beginning, and in a lot of ways, the loneliness and isolation that is at the heart of this song, I've always took that description, at least the when you can't have what you want, you learn to want what you have, more of a description of the place itself rather than Chris's relationships with adults or with children, even though he mentions that. So I've always seen that as learning to appreciate the place rather than the isolation at that place. And I came across a description of adaptive preferences that says that explains it in part as the unequal distribution of resources in unjust social structures can distort the individual's perceptions of her quality of life, blurring the distinction between what she prefers and what she has been made to prefer. So I found an article from edge.org in which Stephen Fuller writes, adaptive preference is a concept that illuminates what happens both in the lab and in life. An adaptive preference results when we bend aspirations toward expectation in light of experience. We come to want what we think is within our grasp. More than a simple reality check, adaptive preference formation involves disciplining one's motivational structure with the benefit of hindsight. Much of what passes for wisdom in life is about the formation of adaptive preferences.
Blew my mind just now.
And the term was coined by a social psychologist, Leon Festinger, who, from what I could tell, also came up with the theory of cognitive dissonance, which I think there definitely are some parallels here. And adaptive preferences was used to explain a doomsday cult that failed to disavow its end of the world beliefs after their prophecies failed to come true. They didn't say that they were wrong. They didn't say that the apocalyptic event had been postponed. They altered their relationship to the deity who previously appeared to claim that there was nothing humans could do to reverse their fate. The terms of this renegotiated relationship then gave the cult members a sense of control over their lives, which served to renew their missionary zeal from that same article. So in the 1980s, the social and political philosopher John Elster generalized the term adaptive preference in a similar way that you did, in terms of the complementary phenomena of sour grapes and sweet lemons. So we tend to downgrade the value of previously desired outcomes as their realization becomes less likely, and upgrade the value of previously undesired outcomes as their realization becomes more likely. So given all that, I hear Chris saying much of what this term theorizes, that we define and redefine our world in ways as to appear to have control over things around us, to make them more meaningful than they really are. And in the case of Devil's Creek, perhaps more interesting than it really is.
I don't know about you, but I'm really I'm really thrilled that doing this show forces us to look up concepts within songs that we would have otherwise just sung along to the car in the car, but not realizing the years and years of research that backs up just that single term, and how much I just learned from, doing this episode of a song that I didn't really think was going to lead to a large academic breakdown. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. And that edge.org article is in a series of scientific terms that philosophers, researchers think should be more commonly understood and known by the public. And I mean that if I had heard maybe that idea of sour grapes previously, I never really thought about that explanation, certainly on my own. I hadn't come across this, the actual like scientific explanation, but so much of the world seems to really make sense by people adjusting their expectations to what is within their reach and what is going to be most easily attainable, or in changing their expectations and changing what they hope to do with their lives, or what to accomplish, or even just the places around them.
Yeah. So then we have this next lyric, which leads to another gigantic rabbit hole of information if you dig into it too much. And it's in the wake of an ancient, shallow, late Cretaceous sea, just this side of a clay packed extinction boundary, a biome breathing, buzzing, humming in the heat. I mean, it's just amazing. This lyric is so unbelievable. So the ancient shallow lake Cretaceous sea referred to here is Lake Agassiz, which used to cover an area of North America larger than the current Great Lakes, and covered parts of what is now Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Ontario, Minnesota, and North Dakota. It is estimated to have been about the size of the Black Sea, just north of Turkey. And it was 475 miles long and 296 miles wide, according to very surface level research. The lake was named after Louis Agassiz, a Swiss-born American biologist and geologist. It wasn't as deep as a lot of modern-day lakes are today, so that's why it's referred to as ancient and shallow. It just literally wasn't that deep of a lake. It was just big. But and also this, I think this is why Beeves Band, I would wager, is called Agassiz after this this ancient, shallow, late Cretaceous sea that covered parts of Manitoba.
Well, I agree, Greg. This lyric is great, and in a lot of different ways, like how it's written, the history behind it, how it connects to the rest of the lyrics. But I think to me, it's also a little at odds with what the rest of the song is saying, at least with the adaptive preferences. So this description of, if it's Manitoba, of the base of Devil's Creek, shows that it is interesting and meaningful, that the region is the geological descendant of a massive ancient glacial lake. Not only can one still find remnants of this foregone lake, there is still, like today, plants and animals above the demarcating strata of plant and animal fossils. And this is one of my favorite lines. I love how it's worded. I love like this feeling of standing on top of history in a positive way, similar to Call Before You Dig. There are things below our feet just waiting to be discovered. And there's this appreciation for life that replaced what came before, which I think is necessary if we care about the future. We have to care about the present and the past. And it's really easy to grow accustomed to the places that we see and to just take them at face value, or to view them only through the lens of how society values them now. I never really thought much about Indiana beaches on Lake Michigan and the shoreline. It was always just a place to go in the summer and you would swim. And that was it. That was the extent of how I defined those lakes.
Yeah.
But now knowing more about the indigenous civilizations the Great Lakes supported, their formation 20,000 years ago as the planet warmed and the glaciers retreated, the changes the local environments are going through as we speak with erosion and rising levels with Lake Michigan, and the fact that 500 million years ago, Indiana and what is like, the base of at the bottom of Lake Michigan was at the equator and itself covered by a shallow sea. So, there's all of this history there, and there is meaning. And even if others don't necessarily find it to be interesting, and again, with the use of figurative language, there's a use of assonance here with the wake of the ancient late Cretaceous, that repeating vowel sound.
Yep.
There's alliteration, a biome breathing, buzzing, humming. And then personification with the biome breathing, like it itself is alive. And I think it's so well done, and there are multiple examples of it, but it's still not overdone, the use of this really evocative language.
I love that you brought up this is a complimentary piece to Call Before You Dig, because I was chatting with Scott Robertson the other day because we hung out all weekend, and he actually said that this song is a complimentary piece to Call Before You Dig for him as well. So you're not the only person who has made this observation to me within the last week. Really cool. And then we have our last lyric. If I seem like I'm somewhere else, it's Devil's Creek. And nowadays, my somewhere else is the sanctuary of my new home, my long bike rides in the summer, my drum set in the basement, my long runs. And if I'm honest with myself, making notes for the podcast. Like, I lose myself when I'm making this show that I do with you, Keith. Like, I feel like I'm at my adult version of Devil's Creek right now, which I feel pretty darn good about that. You know, we're there, Keith. We're at Devil's Creek right now.
Yeah, I agree. There's like nostalgia that's at the core of this track, but I also think it's important to be aware of the Devil's Creeks in our lives now, the places and the things that are sometimes overlooked by others, but still bring us happiness. And I guess for me, that includes early morning walks with my wife and my son before the sun comes up, sitting on a bench at the Heron Rookery in Highland, Indiana, that moment in the middle of a lesson when there's a collective aha moment and my students their faces light up. Saturday night watching Svengoolie and drinking a beer, this podcast as well, which is its own sanctuary for me. And, and notice how that Chris thought that this place wasn't valued or wasn't important, and maybe was sad, and he had to give it a name for it to be interesting. But clearly it's important to many people today because it's important to him.
Well, Keith, thank you for going to Devil's Creek with me today. Instead of doing YouTube comments for this one, I kind of switched it up, because after Chris posted his Patreon video, some of the comments that were over there were so good and so emotive that I just wanted to use a few Patreon comments from Chris's Patreon. So Matt wrote, "This is actually one of my favorite tunes by the band, partly because I had a spot by a creek near my parents' house growing up. And from the other comments, I don't seem to be alone." Mm-hmm. Stefan wrote, "I had a similar spot when I was a kid that we called the Pit," which is super cool. Our friend Shanna, who I recently met in Winnipeg at the show, wrote, "I love how insignificant this is, but that's the beauty of it. It's the little things in life.
Right.
My sisters and I would ride our bikes to the road," capitalized,
right,
which was an abandoned road a block from our house. We'd climb the one tree and play and do nothing. It was great to have a space adults didn't care about. Robbie wrote, "I had a few Devil's Creeks in my neighborhood, but my favorite was a tree in the front yard of my densely packed suburban neighborhood that I would walk in circles around, wearing a path in the soil, and just think. Sometimes a friend would join me. While viewing this ritual, other families in the neighborhood thought I may be on the spectrum. I'm not being facetious. They'd get their kids to ask me." And Andrew wrote, "Cheers, Chris. I love hearing all the personal Devil's Creek stories from other folks on here. I had one too. It was a storm drain ditch creek in my neighborhood in suburban Eastern Tennessee. I spent a lot of time there as a kid. As we got older, we called it Shit Creek because it smelled like shit when we waded through the deep mud in the lower reaches. Finding a salamander, turtle, or snake was a big deal, and in the spring it was full of frog eggs, and saw the odd bass and bluegill in it too when the water level was high. Magical spot to hang out as a kid."
That's awesome.
Love those comments. Keith, you want to tell me what you're taking away from this song?
Well, Greg, I know that I talked about my family's cottage on our Lotus Gate episode, and that part of my childhood was sold and torn down. And I still have haunting dreams about the place almost monthly. And I long for what I miss and what I've lost. And I think about, wishing that I could share that with my son, some place that was so important to my own childhood. But rather than forcing those connections or assuming they would happen, um, I think I'm now thinking about being more open to him finding value in his surroundings, things that I'll miss and I'll overlook, and that maybe I don't think to be interesting or important. I have things in order to move next summer. Nothing is definite, nothing is decided, but I'm pushing pretty hard for this to be my last year in Indiana. And aside from being away in school, down in Southern Indiana or in my Peace Corps service, I've lived in Northwest Indiana my whole life. So a move to Western Pennsylvania, where my wife is from, would be a pretty big transition for me. And that also, though, positively means I get to learn more about the important spots my wife had growing up and to share those with my son. And, this track has some dark elements, not as much as other songs on Failed States. And I do really see a connection to things I like. Amidst a dense and sometimes overwhelming album, many listeners have described it as, obviously being almost too dense or cold. If they prefer supporting cast or, Potemkin City Limits. But I appreciate this glimmer of life and the carving out of hope and positivity by acknowledging the small parts of life that drown out the noise, whether it's Schitt's Creek or the field or Devil's Creek or a drainage ditch. I saw just this past week on social media, a number of people grieving the loss of someone in the hardcore scene in Texas. And our pal Jesse, who's down in Mississippi, reached out to share that a young pillar of the Dallas hardcore scene, Wolon Martin, passed away, which on its own is a tragedy, but especially so with at his very young age, and also with the deaths of members of Power Trip and Iron Age recently. And I think for sometimes, maybe for you and me, it's enough to make an inventory of the positive people, the places and forces that are in our lives to keep our heads above the water. And maybe others need a little bit more help, whether they're managing addiction or mental health struggles. Reading the tributes to this young person, Olon, someone half my age, how devastated people are at his loss. I just want to remind people that, the world is better with you in it, that if you're struggling, you're not alone in your struggles. And if you feel caught or trapped and you can't imagine tomorrow, you don't need to, you just need to imagine today. And just to share resources, the suicide hotline is 1-800-273-8255. And an addiction hotline is 1-800-662-HELP, the word help.
Shout out to Jesse in Mississippi for that heads up on the legacy of Olin Martin. And, for me, additionally, I recently went through a period of my life where I felt utterly disconnected from my entire family history of life on this planet prior to 2013. I felt cut off from my parents, my friends, my extended family, and it felt like I didn't have a personal history. So it felt like all my little Devil's Creek childhood moments almost became illusions, fragmented dreams that I imagined and retained snippets of past memory. But the fact that I was so cut off from so many people I once knew made me feel like I didn't have a personal history and that my Devil's Creek didn't exist anymore. And it got to the point where I felt like my entire childhood was like a mirage. And at any time I would think about places or moments from those years with nobody to reflect upon them with, it gave me no comfort and I only felt more alone. So for a long time, I've pushed my childhood memories down. I've swallowed them and I've kept them sort of in like a mental box for years until fairly recently when I began to let myself feel those things again. And that Devil's Creek makes me think these things has made this the most painful song on the record for several years now. But it always remained this little light at the end of the tunnel for me to remind myself that I have lived a life with people who have loved me that I'm now letting back in And that makes this song hit even harder and more positively because it feels like my Devil's Creek is coming back to me.
That's awesome.
It feels really, really good. Do you want to rate the song, Keith?
Yeah, it's a great track. Musically, lyrically, the information that we get about Chris and his own reflection, introspection, and sharing of his own life, but also the way that we can connect it with our own childhood, or our present moments, or moving forward, as you said, Greg. So I think this is an awesome song. I'm going to give it a solid 4.
Sweet. So I saved this bold statement until the very end of the episode on purpose, so that if people don't listen to the whole thing, they won't hear me say this. I wanted to say this in the first sentence of the episode, but Devil's Creek is my favorite song on Failed States. It hits at the heart of what I've lost from my own childhood, and it's what I'm clawing back to recover in the current rebuilding of my own relationship with my family that I'm currently going through. It's my favorite song on the record. It's a 5 for me. This is a 5. So thank you everybody for listening to, I know we were off for a couple of weeks here, and there may be a few gaps in the upcoming weeks as well in the schedule. But thank you so much for listening always. If you want to find us on social media, you can find us at Propagandhi Pod on Instagram and Twitter. You can email us at propagandhipod@gmail.com. And thanks again to Kyle Shutt and Lang Huck for the conversation and the cover. And once again, thank you to everybody in Winnipeg. What an amazing week I had last week. Just truly astonishing. And Keith, like I said, you're going with me next time, whether you like it or not. So thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Social distancing out the fucking window, I guess. Fucking A! Wait, this one's called Devil's Creek. Devil's Creek. Yeah, buddy! Just south of Forest Prairie, in fact.